The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only thing keeping me tethered to this world. Each mechanical pulse reminded me I was still breathing, still fighting, still here, though barely. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and failure, and the fluorescent lights above me hummed with the same indifference I'd come to expect from everyone lately. My chest felt like someone had parked a tractor on it. 3 days since the attack. 3 days of nurses checking tubes, doctors murmuring about cardiac events and recovery protocols, and me lying here wondering if 68 years of hard work was going to end in a sterile white room with no one beside me. The phone buzzed on the rolling table next to my bed. I shouldn't have reached for it. Dr. Park had been clear about avoiding stress, but when you see your daughter's name on the screen, you answer. That's what fathers do. "Laura," I managed, my voice scraping out like gravel. "Dad." Her tone was clipped, efficient, the same voice she used when coordinating her corporate events, checking items off a list. "Tomorrow is Trevor's birthday. We need you to come help with preparations." I closed my eyes. Trevor, my son-in-law. The man who smiled at community gatherings while quietly suggesting I was becoming a burden to my own daughter. The operations manager who wore expensive suits and spoke in corporate buzzwords while eyeing my farmland like a wolf watching a wounded deer. "Laura, I'm not feeling well." The understatement of the year. I was in intensive care with enough medication in my system to drop a horse. The doctors say, "Then don't you dare come home." The call ended abruptly. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? I stared at the phone in my hand, those words echoing in the silence between heartbeats. Don't you dare come home. Not, I hope you feel better. Not, we'll visit soon. Just a command, cold and final, because I had failed to be useful. My finger hovered over her contact. I could call back, apologize. Explain that my heart had nearly stopped 3 days ago. That I was fighting just to breathe. That maybe, just maybe, her husband's birthday party wasn't my top priority while I was lying here wondering if I'd live to see another sunrise. Instead, I blocked her number. The action felt strangely liberating, like cutting a rope that had been slowly strangling me. The phone went dark in my hand, and I set it down carefully, my arm trembling from even that small effort. A nurse poked her head in, checked my vitals, adjusted something on the IV drip. She didn't ask if I was okay. They never did. You're supposed to be not okay in the ICU. That's why you're here. When she left, I lay in the darkness, listening to my own heartbeat translated into electronic beeps. Somewhere in this building, other families were probably gathering around their loved ones, bringing flowers, holding hands, telling stories to keep spirits up. I had a phone with one blocked contact and a chest full of broken cardiac tissue. "They'll regret making me fight alone," I whispered to the empty room. The words surprised me. I'd never been vengeful. 40 years servicing agricultural machinery, working my way up from field technician to senior executive through discipline and documentation, had taught me patience, taught me that systems have rules and rules can be used by anyone smart enough to understand them. But something had shifted in that phone call. Some fundamental calculation had changed. If they wanted a world without me, I would give them a world where they had nowhere left to stand. The thought settled over me like a winter coat, heavy and protective. My heartbeat steadied slightly on the monitor. The pain in my chest remained, but underneath it, something else was growing. Purpose. I'd spent decades managing complex systems, solving impossible logistics problems, keeping agricultural operations running when everyone said they'd fail. I'd navigated corporate politics, union negotiations, safety inspections. I'd built something from nothing through sheer stubborn competence. And they thought a heart attack made me finished? I closed my eyes and began making lists in my head. Assets, liabilities, leverage points, the same mental process I'd used 1,000 times to fix broken machinery or salvage failing projects. Only this time, the system I needed to repair was my own life, and the components that needed replacing were the people who thought they could discard me. Dr. Park handed me a thick folder. Meds, schedules, restrictions, warning signs. She'd already gone over everything twice. "Martin, your heart isn't fully recovered. Maybe never will be. Any chest pain, dizziness, call immediately, and avoid stress. That's what triggered the attack." I thought of Laura's voice telling me not to come home. Yes, stress. "I'll be careful," I said. She didn't believe me, but she signed the discharge papers anyway. The taxi ride home passed through familiar October farmland, fields I'd worked on decades ago, before promotions and offices, when life was hard but honest. When we turned onto my street, the driver slowed. Cars lined both sides. "What's the address?" "The one with the lights." My house blazed like a nightclub. Music shook the taxi windows. A huge banner. Happy birthday, Trevor, 40 and fabulous. Someone's having a party, the driver said. Yeah, someone is. I stood on the sidewalk holding my medical folder, watching strangers celebrate in my home. A laughing couple walked past me without a glance. The door was unlocked. Of course it was. Everyone was welcome, except me. Inside, Trevor's colleagues and Laura's friends filled every room. My liquor, my food, my space. Someone had moved my reading chair to fit a DJ booth. Laura stood near the kitchen, glowing, laughing with Trevor's parents, happier than I'd seen her in years. Then she saw me. Her smile vanished immediately. Shock, guilt, anger, then irritation. She excused herself from Trevor's parents and marched toward me with the look of someone about to manage a problem. Dad, she kept her voice low, conscious of the crowd. What are you doing here? I live here. You were in the hospital. They discharged me. I held up the folder as evidence. Apparently I'm well enough to come home, to my home. Her jaw tightened. You said you weren't feeling well. You told me not to come home, I said quietly. I assumed you meant temporarily, for the party. Not that you'd throw a celebration in my house without even telling me. We didn't think you'd be released so soon. She glanced back toward the crowd. People were starting to notice us. Conversations dropping off. We were going to talk to you about arrangements for your care, after the heart attack. She crossed her arms, defensive. Trevor's been looking into facilities that specialize in cardiac recovery. Professional supervision. It's probably better than you being alone here, risking another episode with no one around to help. The words were reasonable, caring even, if you didn't know the subtext. But I'd learned to read subtext during 40 years of corporate meetings where the real agenda was never on the official schedule. Facilities, I repeated. You mean you want to put me in assisted living? I mean, we want you to be safe. Trevor appeared beside her, sliding a proprietary arm around her waist. He'd put on weight since the wedding, his face fuller, his expensive suit tailored to hide the soft middle management spread. But his smile was sharp, perfect, practiced. Martin, you're out. His voice carried across the room, projecting concern. We were so worried. Laura's been absolutely devastated. Sure she had. So devastated she blocked my number and threw a party. How are you feeling? Trevor continued, squeezing Laura's shoulder. You gave us quite a scare. The crowd had mostly quieted now, watching. Trevor had turned this into a performance, and he was good at performances. That's how operations managers climb the ladder, by controlling the narrative. I'm recovering, I said. That's wonderful. Really wonderful. Trevor's smile didn't waver. We were actually just discussing you before you arrived, about the farmland lease situation. My land. 300 acres I'd bought piece by piece over 20 years, now leased to agronomists who paid reliable quarterly rent. Income that had kept me comfortable after the company retirement that would have been Laura's inheritance someday. What about it? I asked. Well, with your health situation, Trevor spread his hands, reasonable, regretful. It might be time to consider whether you're really able to manage those contracts. The tenants, the maintenance issues, the legal requirements. It's a lot of stress for someone in your condition. I've managed it fine for 15 years. Before you had a heart attack. Trevor's voice stayed gentle, but his eyes were harder now. The doctors must have told you to avoid stress. Property management is inherently stressful, and honestly, Martin, after what happened, we can't trust that you're thinking clearly about risk. An unpredictable liability, Laura added quietly. That's what Dr. Park called it. Your condition makes you unpredictable. Dr. Park had said no such thing, but half the room had probably already decided I was confused, fragile, not quite all there anymore. The old man who'd had a heart attack, now showing up disheveled at a party he wasn't invited to, arguing about property management. I looked around the room slowly, memorizing faces, witnesses, every careless comment, every exchanged glance, every person who'd come into my home and decided I didn't belong here anymore. Trevor's colleague from the mall, already nodding along with the unpredictable liability assessment. Laura's friend from event planning, lips pursed in sympathetic concern. The agronomist's representative I recognized from lease negotiations, suddenly very interested in his phone. The farmland could be better managed, Trevor was saying, his voice carrying that corporate smoothness, more efficiently structured. Laura and I have been consulting with some financial advisors about. I gently tapped my water glass with one finger. The small sound cut through Trevor's speech with surprising effectiveness. The room went quiet. I smiled. Not a warm smile. Not the smile of a grateful father-in-law or a gracious host. The smile of someone who'd just seen every card in a rigged deck. "Don't stop celebrating on my account," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You'll want good memories when everything you have collapses." Trevor's face went very still. Laura's hand tightened on his arm. I turned and walked toward the stairs, my chest aching, but my steps steady. Behind me, confused murmurs rose like static. Someone turned the music back up, trying to recapture the party atmosphere, but the damage was done. In my bedroom, I closed the door and sat on the edge of my bed, breathing carefully. The folder of medical papers rested beside me. Somewhere in there, Dr. Park had written stern warnings about stress and emotional triggers, but she'd never experienced the peculiar clarity that comes from having nothing left to lose. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. The party finally ended around 2 in the morning. I heard the last cars pull away, doors slamming, laughter fading into the October night, then footsteps on the stairs, deliberate and heavy. Trevor didn't bother knocking. He pushed open my bedroom door like he owned the place. Maybe in his mind, he already did. Laura stood behind him in the hallway, still in her cocktail dress, arms crossed, face unreadable. "We need to talk," Trevor said. I was sitting in the reading chair by the window, still fully dressed, my phone in my hand. I'd been making notes, lists, the kind of careful documentation I'd learned during 40 years of managing complex systems. "About?" I asked. "About you undermining me in front of my guests, in front of my colleagues." He stepped into the room, filling the doorway with his frame. Intimidation through physical presence, classic management technique. "What you said downstairs was completely inappropriate." "Which part?" "The threat, about everything collapsing." His voice was tight, controlled. "You embarrassed Laura. You embarrassed me, in my own celebration." "In my house," I corrected quietly. "A house you can barely maintain anymore." Trevor moved closer. "Let's be honest, Martin. You're not well. You're not thinking clearly. The heart attack has affected your judgment." "My judgment seems fine to me." "Does it?" He leaned against my dresser, casual but coiled. "Because from where I'm standing, you just threatened your own family. You blocked Laura's calls. You showed up tonight trying to what, exactly? Reclaim some territory? Prove you're still in charge?" I stayed quiet, watching him work himself up. This was the Trevor most people never saw, the one underneath the corporate polish. Angry, entitled, convinced the world should rearrange itself for his convenience. "Here's what's going to happen," he continued. "Tomorrow you're going to apologize to Laura, then we're going to sit down with the financial advisor and discuss transferring the farmland lease management to a proper trust. Something professional, something that won't fall apart if you have another episode. And if I refuse?" Trevor's smile was cold. "Then we'll have to explore other options. Legal options, competency evaluations, whatever it takes to protect you from yourself." Laura appeared in the doorway. "Dad, please, we're trying to help." "By taking my property? By making sure you're safe." Her voice cracked slightly. "You almost passed. Do you understand that? Another hour and you might not have made it. We can't just watch you struggle alone." "You weren't watching at all." I kept my voice level. "You were throwing a party." "That's not fair." Trevor cut her off with a raised hand. "This conversation is over. Martin, you have 24 hours to think about what we discussed. Either you cooperate or we move forward without your cooperation. Your choice." He turned to leave, dismissing me. Just like that. Conversation over because he said so, decisions made because he decided them. I stood up from the chair, my chest tight but my voice steady. "Trevor." He paused in the doorway. "You put your hands on me tonight in front of witnesses, I'll document it. You threaten me again, I'll document that too. You try to take what's mine through intimidation or legal manipulation, I'll document every single step." I met his eyes. I've spent 40 years learning how systems work, how institutions function, how evidence chains are built. His face darkened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." I stayed by the chair, not moving closer, keeping my tone conversational. "You want to play corporate games with an old man who spent decades climbing from field technician to executive? Go ahead, but understand what you're starting." Trevor's hands clenched into fists. For a second, I thought he might actually swing. Laura must have seen it too because she grabbed his arm. "Trevor, don't—" He shook her off and took 2 quick steps toward me. His hand shot out and grabbed my collar, pulling me forward with enough force to make my chest flare with pain. "Listen to me, old man," he started. Then we both heard it. A small gasp from the hallway. Nora stood in her pajamas, 10 years old, blonde hair messy from sleep, eyes wide and shocked. My granddaughter, the one person in this house who still looked at me like I mattered. Grandpa? Her voice was tiny, frightened. Trevor released my collar immediately, stepping back, his face cycling through anger to shock to something like shame. But Laura. Laura turned on Nora instead of him. Go back to bed, she snapped. This doesn't concern you. Nora's eyes filled with tears. She looked at me, then at her parents, then fled down the hallway. A door slammed. The silence that followed was absolute. I straightened my collar carefully, my chest aching from the sudden movement. Trevor had turned pale, realizing what he'd done in front of a witness, a child witness, his own daughter. Thank you, I said quietly, for confirming that shove in front of witnesses. Trevor's face went from pale to ashen. He understood immediately. A physical confrontation, a vulnerable elderly man, a traumatized child observer. None of that played well in court, or in social circles, or anywhere else his carefully constructed reputation mattered. I didn't, he started. You did. I looked past him to Laura. You both did, in different ways. I walked past them, my movement slow and deliberate, my hand pressed to my chest. The pain was real. I wasn't faking that. But I also wasn't collapsing. Not yet. Not until I'd finished what was coming. At the door, I paused. You won't like the version of me that walks back in, I said, because he won't be asking for your permission anymore. I went downstairs to the guest room. I wasn't sleeping in my own bedroom with them in the house, and locked the door. My hands were shaking slightly as I pulled out my phone. New note, time stamped. October 24th, 2:17 a.m. Trevor Cole physically grabbed and shoved me during confrontation. Witnessed by granddaughter Nora, age 10. Laura Cole present, did not intervene. Documentation. The foundation of every case I'd ever built. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, my chest tight, my breathing shallow. Dr. Park's warnings echoed in my head. Avoid stress. Avoid confrontation. Avoid anything that might trigger another cardiac event. But if my heart had survived the ICU, if it had survived Laura's phone call and tonight's humiliation, then maybe, just maybe, it could survive long enough to watch their carefully constructed world come apart at the seams. I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling my pulse hammer underneath. Not yet, I told it. We have work to do first. Morning came cold and gray. I made coffee in my own kitchen, alone, while upstairs Trevor and Laura pretended last night hadn't happened. The house felt different now, occupied territory instead of home. I was gone by 7, driving my old pickup truck toward the agricultural complex on the east side of town. My chest ached with every breath, but I'd taken my medications, and I wasn't planning to lift anything heavier than a coffee cup. Damon Price was already at his desk when I arrived. 63 years old, built like a retired linebacker, with a mind that could recall 30 years of regulatory frameworks, contract law, and agricultural policy without notes. We'd started together as field technicians back in '83, worked our way up through different departments, stayed friends through marriages and divorces, and everything between. He looked up when I walked into his office, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. Martin, heard you had some heart trouble. Still ticking. I settled into the chair across from his desk carefully. Barely. Bad. Bad enough. 3 days in ICU. Discharged yesterday. Damon's smile faded. And you're here instead of resting because? Because I need information, and you're the only person I trust to give it to me straight. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. What kind of information? I told him about Laura's call, the party, Trevor's plans for my farmland, the physical confrontation, all of it, keeping my voice flat and factual, the way I'd learned to deliver bad news to supervisors who didn't want to hear it. When I finished, Damon was quiet for a long moment. Your son-in-law is an operations manager at Cole Retail Complex, right? He finally asked. Yeah. The new agronomical supply mall out on Highway 40? That's the one. Damon pulled open a filing cabinet and started thumbing through folders. We do business with them. Safety inspections, equipment certification, regulatory compliance for their agricultural wing. He pulled out a thick folder. Trevor Cole oversees all of that. And about 6 months ago, we started noticing irregularities. Damon opened the folder, scanning pages. Nothing major, just little things. Inspection schedules postponed, documentation filed late, requests for extensions on compliance deadlines. That's not illegal. No, but it's sloppy. And your son-in-law doesn't strike me as sloppy. He strikes me as someone who cuts corners when he thinks nobody's watching. Damon looked up. Also, about 3 months ago, we got a request from someone at Cole Complex trying to access your farmland lease records. My chest tightened. What kind of access? Information on your tenants, payment history, contract terms. They claimed it was for a regional agricultural assessment they were conducting. I flagged it as suspicious and denied the request. Did you document who made it? Course I did. He slid a form across the desk. Assistant Operations Manager, Cole Complex. Reports directly to Trevor Cole. There it was. Evidence that Trevor had been maneuvering around my property before my heart attack, before he'd had any legitimate reason to claim concern about my capacity to manage anything. Can I get copies of this? I asked. You can get copies of anything you want. Damon closed the folder. But Martin, what are you planning here? Justice. That's not an answer. I met his eyes. Trevor wants to push me into assisted living and take control of my assets. Laura apparently agrees. They think I'm too fragile to fight back. Are you? Probably, medically speaking. I touched my chest. But I've got enough fight left for one last project. Damon was quiet for another moment. Then he opened a different drawer and pulled out a calendar. Regional Agricultural Conference, he said. 3 weeks from now. Big venue downtown, maybe 500 people from across 3 counties. Industry leaders, equipment manufacturers, regulatory officials, agronomists, property owners. So your son-in-law is scheduled to give a presentation on integrated retail and agricultural operations management. 20-minute slot, main stage, right before lunch. Damon looked at me meaningfully. Very high profile, very public. Understanding washed over me like cold water. Who approves the conference schedule? I asked. Planning committee, which I happen to chair this year. Damon's smile was grim. And we've got 1 booth slot still available. Premium location, right at the main entrance. Perfect for educational displays, case studies, technical presentations. How much? For you? Nothing. Call it a professional courtesy. He slid a registration form across the desk. Assuming you're planning to present something educational, of course, something about proper documentation practices, regulatory compliance, the importance of integrity in agricultural management. I took the form, my hand steady despite the chaos screaming through my nervous system. 3 weeks, I said. That's not much time, especially for someone recovering from cardiac trauma. It's enough. I stood carefully. Thank you, Damon. Don't thank me yet. You still have to build whatever case you're building. He walked me to the door. And Martin? Be careful. Men like Trevor don't lose gracefully. Neither do men like me. I drove home slowly, my mind already working through logistics. 3 weeks to gather evidence, to document Trevor's corner cutting, his falsified reports, his attempts to access my property records, to build a presentation that would expose him publicly without crossing into anything illegal or actionable. I wasn't going to hurt him physically, wasn't going to frame him for crimes he didn't commit, wasn't going to break any laws. I was going to do something far more devastating. I was going to make 500 people see exactly who Trevor Cole really was. The house was empty when I got home. Laura and Trevor had taken Nora to school and gone to work. I had the place to myself for the first time since being discharged. I went to my office, the small room off the kitchen where I'd managed farmland leases and company business for 15 years, and opened my filing cabinets, contracts, tenant agreements, payment histories, maintenance logs, tax records, insurance policies. 40 years of documentation habits were about to pay compound interest. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and started making lists. Not angry scribbles, not emotional outbursts, clean, methodical project planning, the same way I'd approached every complex problem during my career. Phase 1. Evidence gathering. Phase 2, strategic positioning. Phase 3, public exposure. Phase 4, let the consequences play out naturally, no aggression, no unauthorized monitoring, no fabricated evidence. Just truth, presented at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right audience. They took my kindness for weakness, I wrote at the bottom of the first page. Now they'll take my silence for consent, right up until it ends them. My chest ached as I worked, but the pain felt different now, purposeful. Like my damaged heart was pumping something stronger than before. Not quite hatred, not quite revenge. Something colder, more sustainable. Justice with a 20-year compound interest rate. The next 2 weeks blurred into a rhythm of careful investigation and deliberate patience. I moved like a ghost through my own life. Present, but not participating, documenting everything. Trevor and Laura had stopped pushing the assisted living conversation, probably assuming my silence meant capitulation. They were polite now, distant, treating me like a problem temporarily tabled rather than solved. Fine by me. Let them think I'd accepted my place. I spent mornings reviewing my farmland records with obsessive precision. The 300 acres were divided among 4 tenant agreements: agronomists growing rotation crops, maintaining the soil, paying quarterly rent that had been deposited like clockwork into my account for 15 years. Clean contracts, professional relationships, 0 issues. I documented every payment, every maintenance report, every communication. Built a paper trail that showed competent management by someone who clearly understood agricultural property administration. Then I started pulling public records on Cole Retail Complex. The mall had opened 2 years ago with significant fanfare, a revolutionary integration of retail space and agricultural supply distribution. Trevor had been promoted to operations manager specifically to oversee the complex systems required to make it work. On paper, it looked impressive. In practice, I started finding cracks. Safety inspection reports showed extensions granted multiple times, not illegal, but concerning when the pattern repeated. Fire suppression system certifications that had been filed 3 weeks late. Agricultural equipment storage protocols that didn't quite meet county code but had been grandfathered in through some regulatory loophole. Nothing criminal, just evidence of someone who prioritized appearance over substance, who let things slide when he thought nobody was watching. I made copies of everything, filed them in chronological order, built timelines. Damon connected me with 2 former employees from Cole Complex who'd left under less than ideal circumstances. One had raised concerns about safety protocols and been quietly let go during a restructuring. The other had questioned some financial reporting and found himself transferred to a less desirable position until he quit. Neither wanted to go on record officially. They needed references, needed to move on with their careers. But they were willing to talk informally, to confirm suspicions, to point me toward documentation that was technically public but buried under layers of bureaucratic opacity. I learned that Trevor's presentation at the Regional Agricultural Conference was meant to be a career boost, a chance to showcase Cole Complex's innovative approach to industry partners and potential investors. He'd been preparing for months, practicing his speech, designing slides that emphasized integration and efficiency. Perfect. Around week 2, I started making quiet visits to members of the local agricultural community. Not confrontational meetings, just casual conversations with people I'd known for decades. I'd stop by the feed supply co-op and mention to the manager that I was working on a presentation about property management integrity. Did he have any thoughts about best practices? I'd grab coffee with an agronomist who leased from 3 different landowners and ask casually about his experience with different management styles. What made a good landlord versus a problematic one? I'd attend a county planning meeting and listen to discussions about commercial agricultural facility oversight. Take notes. Ask thoughtful questions. Never mentioning Trevor directly. Never making accusations. Just establishing myself as someone still active, still competent, still engaged with the community despite my health situation. Word spread the way it always does in agricultural circles, quietly but effectively. People started asking each other about Martin Calder. Wasn't he the one who'd had the heart attack? Yeah, but he seemed sharp as ever at the planning meeting. His daughter's married to that operations manager from Cole Complex, right? The one giving the big presentation at the conference? Small connections, subtle associations, building context for what was coming. I spent evenings working on my own conference presentation, not flashy, no corporate polish or expensive graphics, just clear, factual documentation about regulatory compliance in agricultural property management, case studies drawn from real examples, anonymized but recognizable to anyone who knew where to look, a section on the importance of timely safety inspections, a segment on transparency in lease management, a discussion of how cutting corners creates systemic vulnerabilities. All of it accurate, all of it sourced, all of it devastatingly relevant to anyone familiar with Trevor's operational patterns. I worked late into the nights, my chest occasionally tightening, my medications lined up on the desk like soldiers. Dr. Park had scheduled follow-up appointments that I kept religiously. My heart was healing, slowly, but it was healing. "You seem tense," she noted during week 3 while checking my vital signs. "I'm working on a project." "What kind of project?" "Closure," I said. She frowned, but didn't push. What could she say? That I should just accept being discarded? That I should let my daughter and son-in-law take everything I'd built without objection? The medical profession could treat cardiac tissue. It couldn't heal what Laura's phone call had broken. One evening, Trevor's colleague from the mall stopped by the house. I was in my office when I heard voices in the foyer, Laura greeting someone warmly, leading them to the living room. I stayed where I was, door slightly ajar, listening. "We're so excited about Trevor's presentation," the colleague was saying. "It's going to put Cole Complex on the map with the agricultural sector. Real credibility." "He's been working so hard on it," Laura replied, pride obvious in her voice. The timing couldn't be better either. We've got investors looking at expansion possibilities, and this conference is the perfect venue to demonstrate our operational excellence. Operational excellence. I almost laughed. They talked for another 20 minutes about Trevor's bright future, about expansion plans, about how important reputation and public perception were in their industry. Every word was a gift. Every assumption about Trevor's untouchable success made what was coming more perfectly calibrated. When the colleague left, I heard Laura come upstairs. She paused outside my office door, probably noticed the light under the frame, but she didn't knock. We'd barely spoken in 2 weeks. Fine by me. We'd talk soon enough. In front of 500 witnesses. I pulled out the conference registration Damon had given me and filled it out carefully. Booth location. Main entrance. Presentation title: Documentation and Integrity, Foundations of Agricultural Management. Presenter: Martin Calder, retired agricultural executive. I sealed it in an envelope and set it aside for morning delivery. Then I opened my project folder and looked at the timeline I'd built. Everything was coming together. Evidence compiled, witnesses identified, presentation drafted, strategic positioning complete. In 3 days, the Regional Agricultural Conference would open. In 3 days, Trevor Cole would step onto that stage expecting applause, and I would make certain that every person in that room understood exactly who they were applauding. If Trevor wanted to be the face of success, I'd make sure everyone saw what grew behind the mask. 2 nights before the conference, I stayed late at the agricultural complex finishing presentation materials. Damon had given me access to the print shop to run copies of my documentation packets, 40 pages each, professionally bound, containing every regulation citation and case study I'd referenced. Clean, legal, factual. I was loading the last box into my truck bed around 9 p.m. when headlights swept across the parking lot. A sleek sedan pulled in fast, tires crunching gravel, stopping at an angle that blocked my driver's door. Trevor stepped out. He'd clearly come straight from some business function, suit jacket, loosened tie, face flushed either from alcohol or anger or both. He crossed the parking lot with deliberate steps, his shoes clicking on pavement. Martin. His voice was tight. We need to talk. I closed the truck bed carefully, turned to face him. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few vehicles belonging to night maintenance staff. Security lights cast everything in harsh yellow. About? I asked. About you registering for a conference booth without telling anyone. About you preparing some kind of presentation that apparently involves the agricultural industry. He stepped closer. About you trying to embarrass me. I'm presenting on regulatory compliance. Standard industry topic. Don't play games with me. Trevor's hands clenched. I've heard the rumors. People asking questions about Coal Complex. About our safety protocols. About my management style. That's you, isn't it? Spreading gossip. I've been having conversations with colleagues. That's not gossip. It's sabotage. He closed the distance between us until he was standing too close, invading space, using his size. You think I don't know what you're doing. You're trying to undermine me before my presentation, trying to make me look bad because you're bitter about your health situation. My chest was starting to tighten, but I kept my voice level. I'm presenting factual information about industry best practices. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. You're not presenting anything. Trevor grabbed my jacket collar, the same move he'd used that night at the house. You're going to withdraw your registration, tonight, or I'll make you withdraw it. By doing what exactly? I stayed still, not fighting back, very aware that we were in a public space with security cameras. Assaulting me again? In front of cameras this time instead of just my granddaughter? His grip tightened. You mention Nora again, and I'll... You'll what? I looked directly into his eyes. Hit me? An elderly man with a cardiac condition? Your wife's father? Think about how that looks, Trevor. Think about who watches these parking lots. He shoved me backward. I'd been anticipating it, had positioned myself next to the truck bed specifically for this. I stumbled, but caught myself against the tailgate, my chest flaring with pain, but my feet under me. Trevor advanced, his face twisted with rage now. You don't get to threaten me. You don't get to ruin everything I've built because you can't handle getting old and irrelevant. I haven't threatened you once. I straightened slowly, hand pressed to my chest. I've simply documented reality. If reality threatens you, that's your problem. He grabbed for me again, but this time I was ready. 40 years of servicing agricultural machinery had taught me about leverage and momentum. I sidestepped, letting his own force carry him forward into empty space. Trevor stumbled, tried to catch himself, and went down hard on one knee in the gravel. For a moment, we both froze. Then I heard it, the distinct electronic chime of a phone camera. Someone was filming from across the parking lot. A mall employee, young woman in Cole Complex uniform, her phone held up and recording. Trevor scrambled to his feet, gravel clinging to his expensive suit pants. His face had gone from red to ashen. He looked at the employee, at me, at the security cameras he'd apparently forgotten about. "This isn't over," he said, his voice shaking. "Yeah," I replied quietly. "It is. You just don't know it yet." He stalked back to his sedan, spraying gravel as he peeled out of the parking lot. The employee lowered her phone and approached cautiously. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. Thank you for documenting that." "He's my manager. Was. I just submitted my resignation this afternoon because of how he treats people." She looked at her phone. "I'm sending this to my personal email right now, just in case." "Smart." She hesitated. "Are you really going to expose him at the conference?" "I'm going to present facts," I said. "What people do with those facts is up to them." She nodded and walked back toward the mall entrance. I stood in the parking lot for another moment, breathing carefully, my chest screaming at me, but my mind clear and focused. Trevor had just given me one more piece of evidence, one more witness, one more example of his real character underneath the corporate polish. I drove home slowly, reviewing what had happened. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I'd anticipated. Trevor couldn't help himself. Put pressure on him, and he resorted to intimidation and physical aggression. Predictable, documented, soon to be very, very public. Laura was waiting when I got home, sitting in the dark living room like an ambush. "Trevor called," she said as I came through the door. "He says you're trying to sabotage his career." "I'm presenting at a professional conference." "He says you are spreading lies about his management at the mall." "I haven't lied about anything." I set my keys down carefully. Every word I've said is documented fact. Laura stood up, her silhouette backlit by kitchen light. "Why are you doing this, Dad? What do you want?" "I want you to understand what you said to me on that phone call. I was stressed. You were in the hospital and Trevor's birthday was—" "You told your father in intensive care not to dare come home," I interrupted. "Because I couldn't help with a party. Do you remember saying that?" She was quiet. "Then I came home to find you'd thrown that party in my house without even telling me. Found you discussing my farmland like it was already yours. Found Trevor physically grabbing me in my own bedroom." I kept my voice level. "And you defended him. Not me. Him. You're twisting everything." "I'm remembering everything." I moved toward the stairs. "And in 2 days, so will 500 other people." "Dad, please." Her voice cracked. "If you do this, if you humiliate Trevor publicly, it'll destroy our family." I paused on the bottom step. "Laura," I said quietly, "you destroyed our family when you made that phone call. I'm just making sure everyone else sees what I already know." I went upstairs, leaving her standing in the dark. In my office, I pulled out the employee's business card she'd slipped me in the parking lot. Her personal email was written on the back, along with a note. "The video is yours if you need it." I added it to my evidence folder. 2 days until the conference. 2 days until Trevor Cole learned what happened when you mistook patience for weakness. You just showed me exactly how scared you are, I thought, looking at the folder full of documentation. And I'm going to use that fear like a scalpel. The morning before the conference, I received a call from Patricia Vance, president of the County Agricultural Association. I'd known Patricia for 20 years. She'd been a junior agronomist when I was still doing field maintenance, had worked her way up to running the most influential farming advocacy group in 3 counties. "Martin," she said, her voice warm but curious, "I heard you're presenting at tomorrow's conference." "That's right. And I've been hearing some interesting conversations about regulatory compliance at Cole Retail Complex. Your son-in-law's operation." I said nothing, letting the silence work. "People are asking questions," Patricia continued, "about safety protocols, about whether Trevor Cole is as competent as his marketing suggests, about why a retired executive with a recent cardiac event is suddenly active in industry discussions again." "And what are you asking, Patricia?" "I'm asking if I should be concerned." Her tone shifted, became more serious. "Because tomorrow, Trevor is giving a major presentation positioning Cole Complex as a model operation, and you're presenting on regulatory integrity. Those 2 things existing in the same conference feels intentional." "It is. Martin, I respect you. Always have. But I need to know. Are you planning to create a situation that damages the conference's credibility? Because if this is personal family drama—" "It's business," I interrupted. "Documented, factual, relevant business. Everything I'm presenting is sourced from public records, professional observations, and industry standard practices. Nothing personal, nothing slanderous. Patricia was quiet for a moment. But it will reflect poorly on Trevor. It will reflect accurately on his operational patterns. Whether that's poor depends on what those patterns actually are. Another pause. Then, send me your presentation materials. I want to review them before tomorrow. You don't trust me? I trust you completely, but I'm responsible for this conference's reputation, and I need to make sure whatever you're doing won't backfire on all of us. I sent her the files. 40 minutes later, she called back. This is solid, she said, and I could hear the shift in her voice. Respect replacing concern. Every citation checks out. Every case study is relevant. And yes, anyone familiar with Cole Complex will recognize the patterns you're highlighting. So, I can present? You can present. But Martin? She paused. What you're doing here, it's not just about your son-in-law, is it? This is about setting a standard, about showing that reputation isn't the same as reality. That's exactly what it's about. Good. We need more of that in this industry. Another pause. Trevor's not going to handle this well. I know. Your daughter won't either. I know that too. And you're doing it anyway. I'm doing it because it's necessary. Patricia sighed. I'll make sure you have adequate time for Q&A after your presentation. I suspect people will have questions. Thank you. After we hung up, I sat in my office reviewing the final materials one last time. My chest felt tight, but Dr. Park had cleared me for limited professional activities. Limited was a flexible term. Around noon, Damon called. You're not going to believe this, he said, but I just got a call from the planning committee. Apparently several people have contacted them about your presentation topic. Concern or interest? Interest, real interest. Patricia Vance pushed your session to the main auditorium. Same venue Trevor's using. Says there's too much demand for the small conference room. My heart skipped. How many people? We're estimating maybe 200 for your session. Right after lunch, before Trevor's presentation. People want to hear what you have to say about regulatory integrity, apparently. He chuckled. Word got around that Martin Calder is making his first public appearance since the heart attack, and suddenly everyone's curious. Perfect. Not because I wanted attention, but because a larger audience meant more witnesses. More people who would hear the documentation, understand the implications, and carry that understanding forward when Trevor took the stage 30 minutes later. You still feeling good about this? Damon asked. Better than I have in weeks. You know there's no going back after tomorrow, right? Whatever happens with your family, there's nothing left to go back to, I said quietly. They made that clear? That afternoon, I drove to 3 of my tenant agronomist's properties, not to ask for anything, just to check in, see how crops were progressing, discuss lease renewal terms for next year, professional courtesy visits, the kind I'd done for 15 years. But word spreads in agricultural communities. By the time I left the third property, I'd overheard 2 separate phone conversations where my tenants mentioned to colleagues that Martin Calder seemed sharp as ever, managing his properties actively, no signs of the incompetence his family had apparently been suggesting. Reputation rehabilitation through simple professional competence. That evening, I got a text from Laura. We need to talk before tomorrow. I didn't respond. Another text. Dad, please. Trevor is really stressed about his presentation. Can't you just postpone yours? Give him his moment? I turned off my phone. Around 10 p.m., I heard a car pull into the driveway. Footsteps on the porch. Knocking. I didn't answer. More knocking. Laura's voice through the door. Dad, I know you're home. Your truck is here. Please talk to me. I sat in my office, lights off, looking at the evidence folders spread across my desk. 40 years of documentation habits. 40 years of understanding that truth, properly organized and strategically presented, was more powerful than any emotional appeal. Laura knocked for another 5 minutes, then gave up. I heard her car leave, opened my phone to a flood of texts. You're being unreasonable. Trevor didn't mean to push you. You're letting your health issues cloud your judgment. If you do this tomorrow, I don't know if I can forgive you. That last one almost made me laugh. She didn't know if she could forgive me. I typed one response. Tomorrow you'll understand exactly what you did. So will everyone else. Then I blocked her number too. Sat alone in the dark office, my chest aching, my medications lined up like ammunition, my presentation materials ready for battle. Somewhere across town, Trevor was probably rehearsing his speech about operational excellence and innovative management, probably polishing slides about Cole Complex's bright future, probably sleeping soundly, confident in his untouchable reputation. Tomorrow, he'd learn that reputations were just collective agreements about perception, and agreements could be renegotiated when new information emerged. I went to bed early, setting 3 alarms. The conference started at 8 a.m. My presentation was scheduled for 1:15 p.m. Trevor's followed at 2 p.m. 15 hours until the world saw what I'd built. 15 hours until Trevor Cole's carefully constructed image met documented reality. I closed my eyes and, for the first time in weeks, slept soundly. The Regional Agricultural Conference occupied the entire downtown convention center. 3 floors, 12 conference rooms, a massive exhibition hall, and a main auditorium that seated 400. I arrived at 7:30 with my boxes of presentation materials and my evidence folders organized in chronological order. Damon met me at the registration desk, already wearing his planning committee badge. "Your booth is set up," he said, handing me my presenter credentials. "Main entrance, premium location, just like I promised. And Martin, the auditorium is already half full for your 1:15 session." "How many for Trevor's 2 o'clock?" "About the same, but here's the interesting part. Most of the people registered for your session are also staying for his." Damon's expression was carefully neutral. "They want to hear both presentations back to back." "Perfect." I spent the morning at my booth, setting out documentation packets and fielding questions from early arrivals. People I'd worked with decades ago, agronomists I'd done business with, industry colleagues who remembered when I was climbing through company ranks. All of them asking the same careful questions. "How are you feeling? Are you really back to work? What made you decide to present today?" And underneath those questions, the real curiosity. "What do you know about Trevor Cole?" I didn't volunteer information. Just answered questions professionally, directed people to the documentation, explained that my presentation would cover regulatory compliance best practices with relevant case studies. By noon, word had spread through the conference that something significant was happening in the 1:15 session. The exhibition hall was buzzing with speculation. I saw Trevor arrive around 12:30 with Laura and a group of Cole Complex executives. He looked confident, relaxed, working the crowd like he'd been born to it. Laura stayed at his side, smiling, playing the supportive wife role perfectly. Neither of them looked toward my booth. At 1 o'clock, I packed up my materials and headed to the auditorium. The room was nearly full already, maybe 250 people, more filing in. Front rows occupied by industry leaders, agricultural association board members, equipment manufacturers. Middle sections filled with agronomists, property managers, logistics coordinators. And scattered throughout, I recognized faces from Cole Complex. Trevor's colleagues, his employees, his professional circle, here to support his big presentation. They'd all hear mine first. Patricia Vance found me backstage at 1:10. "Nervous?" she asked. "Surprisingly calm?" "Your son-in-law just walked in. Back row, left side. Laura's with him." I looked through the stage curtain. Trevor sat with arms crossed, face neutral, but jaw tight. Laura leaned close, whispering something. They both looked tense. "Good." "5 minutes," Patricia said. "You ready?" "I've been ready since the phone call." She didn't ask which call. She just nodded and walked out to introduce me. The auditorium quieted as Patricia took the podium. "Good afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Patricia Vance, president of the County Agricultural Association and your conference host. Our next presenter needs no introduction to those of us who've worked in this industry for more than a few years. Martin Calder started as a field technician servicing agricultural machinery and worked his way up to senior executive positions through decades of discipline, documentation, and leadership. He's presenting today on regulatory compliance and operational integrity, topics that affect every single person in this room. She gestured to the stage. Please welcome Martin Calder. Applause filled the auditorium as I walked to the podium. Not perfunctory conference clapping, real, warm recognition from people who remembered my work. I set down my notes and looked out at the crowd. Trevor's face in the back row had gone carefully blank. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady through the microphone. "I'm going to discuss something uncomfortable today, not because I want to create drama, but because integrity in our industry depends on confronting uncomfortable truths." I clicked to the first slide. Documentation and integrity? Why reality matters more than reputation? For 40 years, I built my career on a simple principle: document everything. Not because I didn't trust people, but because systems need accountability. When we manage agricultural operations, property leases, safety protocols, regulatory compliance, documentation is the only thing standing between professional excellence and catastrophic failure. Click. Next slide. a timeline of safety inspection requirements for agricultural retail facilities. Let me show you what happens when documentation becomes inconvenient. I walked the audience through the case studies. Public records, anonymized but recognizable. Late fire system certifications, repeated safety extension requests, storage violations, unauthorized attempts to access competitor property records. I never mentioned Coal Complex or Trevor by name. I didn't have to. The room grew quieter as people began glancing at Trevor in the back row, his posture tightening. I clicked to a slide on lease management integrity. Transparency keeps tenant relationships healthy, but when someone tries to access records under fake regional assessments, that's manipulation. I displayed the redacted request Damon had shown me. The Coal Retail Complex letterhead was unmistakable. A murmur rippled through the room. Trevor stood. Laura forced him back down. I kept going. Integrity means your public image matches your private actions. When communities trust us, we don't cut corners the moment scrutiny fades. More slides. A 6-month review of agricultural facilities. Most performed well. But one showed a consistent pattern of shortcuts. Late filings, deadline extensions, unauthorized access attempts, individually minor. Collectively, a portrait of someone who values image over substance. Silence followed. My final slide, the foundation of trust. Trust is everything. When leadership loses integrity, entire systems collapse. I looked directly at Trevor. So who do you trust? The polished presentation or the accurate documentation? The auditorium was still. Then applause started. Hesitant, then growing. About half the room stood. Trevor and Laura remained frozen, pale and rigid. Questions followed. I answered carefully, reinforcing the patterns without naming him. When Patricia called time, the applause was louder. I walked off stage, passing Trevor. His hands shook. Laura looked ill. And in 30 seconds, he was supposed to present on operational excellence. I didn't stay to watch. The damage was done. As I stepped into the exhibition hall, one thought settled in. Everyone is looking at Trevor now, and they see exactly what I intended. I didn't attend Trevor's presentation, didn't need to witness his humiliation firsthand, but word traveled fast through the conference, spreading like wildfire through the exhibition hall. Trevor had tried to proceed as if nothing had happened, walked onto the stage, pulled up his slides about integrated operational systems and innovative management protocols. But the audience was different now, cold, skeptical. Every claim he made about safety standards met with visible doubt. Someone had asked during Q&A about the inspection extension patterns. Trevor stammered something about industry standard processes. Another person questioned the lease record access attempt. Trevor claimed it was a miscommunication by a junior staff member. Each answer sounded more defensive, more hollow. Patricia told me later that he'd cut his presentation short by 10 minutes and practically fled the stage. 4 hours later, I got a text from Damon. You need to see this. Coal Complex, main entrance, now. I drove across town to the retail mall. The parking lot was chaos. Emergency vehicles, crowds of people, water streaming from the main entrance. The sprinkler system had malfunctioned, not a small leak, a complete systemic failure. Every sprinkler head in the main retail corridor had opened simultaneously, dumping thousands of gallons across the sales floor. I found Damon near the emergency response perimeter. The fire suppression system was overdue for inspection by 3 months, he said. Trevor kept requesting extensions. When it finally got tested 2 weeks ago, the report noted minor irregularities, but certified it functional. Minor irregularities. The pressure regulators were miscalibrated. One alarm trigger cascaded through the entire system. Damon shook his head. There are 50 people inside, including investors who were here for Trevor's operational excellence tour. I watched water pour from the entrance, reflecting emergency lights. Then Trevor emerged, drenched, his expensive suit clinging to him. He was yelling at a maintenance supervisor. I told you to fix this weeks ago. This is your failure, not mine. The supervisor walked away. Trevor stood in the parking lot, water streaming off him, surrounded by onlookers. Someone was filming on a phone. He saw me standing there with Damon, his face twisted with rage. He started walking toward me, fists clenched. Trevor stopped 10 feet away, breathing hard. This is your fault, he spat. The presentation, the rumors. You poisoned everyone against me. The sprinkler system failed because you delayed inspections, I said calmly. That's documented fact. You're destroying my career over a personal grudge. I presented public records. You destroyed your own career. You had no right. I had every right. You tried to take my property. You assaulted me. You convinced my daughter I was incompetent. I kept my voice level. All I did was show people the truth. Trevor's face turned red. The old man ruined me. This is all his fault. He was yelling now, losing control in front of dozens of witnesses. Emergency personnel staring, his own employees watching. All his fault, Trevor screamed, pointing at me. 2 security guards grabbed his arms, pulling him back. Sir, you need to calm down, one said. Get off me. I'm the operations manager here. Sir, your supervisor has asked us to escort you off the property. He said you're too emotionally compromised to handle the crisis. Trevor stopped struggling. My supervisor? The words hit him like a physical blow. His own supervisor. Removing him. In front of everyone. He turned back to me, defeat breaking across his expression. You've destroyed me, he whispered. No, I said. I just stopped pretending you hadn't already destroyed yourself. The security guards led him away. He didn't resist, just walked like a man heading to his own funeral. The video of Trevor's meltdown hit social media within an hour. Trevor Cole, operations manager, drenched and screaming about how an old man had ruined him. Around 9 p.m., my doorbell rang. Laura stood on my porch, makeup smeared from crying, eyes red and swollen. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Dad, she whispered, please. Trevor's on administrative leave. They're talking about terminating his contract. Her voice cracked. You did this. You destroyed his reputation. I presented documentation. He's my husband. How could you do this to our family? I held up my phone, pulled up the audio recording from the ICU. Hit play. Her voice came through the speaker, clear and cold. Tomorrow is Trevor's birthday. We need you to come help with preparations. My voice weak. Laura, I'm not feeling well. Her voice sharp. Then don't you dare come home. I let it play in the silence between us. Laura's face crumbled. Then I played the next recording. The party. Trevor discussing my unpredictable liability status, making plans for my future without my input. I was scared, she whispered. You almost passed. You wanted me in assisted living. You wanted my property. You wanted me out of the way. I kept my voice level. Trevor didn't convince you. He just gave you permission. I played another recording. Trevor in the parking lot. You're going to withdraw your registration, or I'll make you withdraw it. The sound of the shove. When was this? Laura asked. 2 nights ago. Your husband threatened and assaulted me. Again, all documented. What do you want? An apology? We'll apologize. You can't make this right. I looked at her. You made a choice when you told me not to come home. You chose Trevor's convenience over your father's life. I chose my husband. You chose wrong. I pulled out one more file on my phone. The conference registration list, the investor names, the corporate representatives who'd witnessed everything. Tomorrow morning, this all gets submitted to Cole Complex's parent corporation. Documentation of safety violations, recordings of Trevor's threats, video of his public breakdown, witness statements from the conference. Dad, please. And this, I held up a legal envelope, goes to my attorney. Updated will. Updated property trust. Everything goes to Nora when she turns 25. You and Trevor get nothing. Laura's face went white. You told me not to dare come home, I said quietly. So I'm making sure you understand what it feels like to lose one. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Nora appeared in the doorway, woken by the voices. She looked at her mother, then at me. Grandpa? Laura reached for her daughter, but I stepped aside, letting Nora see everything. The tears, the desperation, the consequences. Your mother made choices, I said to Nora. Remember that when you're older. People make choices, and choices have results. I looked back at Laura one final time. You tried to erase me, but all I had to do was remind the world who you truly are. I closed the door. Through the window, I watched Laura collapse on the porch steps, sobbing. Watched her pull out her phone, probably calling Trevor. Watched her realize that nobody was coming to save them this time. Inside, Nora looked up at me with wide eyes. Are you okay, Grandpa? I touched my chest, feeling my heart beat steady and strong despite everything. Yeah, I said. I'm okay now.